Hello. SecDim Play is a novel game for learning secure programming and secure infrastructure, or DevSecOps. It has a collection of security puzzles, challenges, and each challenge is essentially a program or infrastructure code with a security bug. It's either a vulnerability or a insecure configuration. Our goal is to find the security issue and effectively fix it. Once it's fixed, we get a score for the challenge. For today, we'll be discussing the introduction challenge of Java, in which we can, well, I'm assuming you've already made an account, but essentially, if you go in over here, you will be asked to sign in. So for Java, I'm going to start the introduction.java. This challenge in particular, we will explore a simple way to understand how to play on SecDim Play. So as you can see, clicking play shows me the pop out over here. And that pop out has 10 tries left for this challenge, and we had a duration of 1 hour. So meaning if you run out of time, you can always try it again. You have to 10 tries. Clicking let's do this, the timer will start. So upon doing this, seeing that you already have an account and an SSH key set up, we can begin this immediately. Upon starting, we are right here. You can clone the repository. We have the fork for this. You can clone this on your local drive. Now that we have started the challenge, we can see that we have the README, which has the existing instructions that we had before. In addition, we have the repository. Now, this is a remote repository in our browser. We can go through it, we can save and edit the files as we need, and we can run the app locally as well. All of the changes that we make over here will be committed and pushed to our remote repository, against which we can run tests. And those tests will then determine if we pass, we get a score of the challenge. But if you fail, then as long as you have time remaining, you can continue pushing more changes and attempting the challenge. Now that we have already started the challenge, let's have a look over here. Here in our repository, we have our files, which has our source, as you can see, the introduction.java. Our main source code for this Java app is in the application.java that we can have a look over here. And as you can see, it's a very simplistic application. It's a web app that runs on this port, and that it just simply returns a hello, the function being run over here. In this challenge, we have to understand that there are two things, essentially, that are accompanying our app. Those are the security specification and the usability specification. The security specification over here, they outline what essentially is the security vulnerability in the app. That is one thing, and the other is the usability. Essentially, whenever we test, the usability test will always pass because they outline the framework by which the app functions. We don't want to break the app in the process of fixing it. So every time when we run the test, these ought to pass. As you can see, we expect that the first test looks that the web server will just send back a response of 200. That's good. And that the app should be returning us hello. So that's good. That's essentially what the app is doing in this example. The security specification, as mentioned before, it is essentially the security vulnerability that is going to be tested. What this test essentially does is that we have turned what an attacker might want to use as a payload against our application, and we have turned it into a security test. So every time when we test our changes, the security test will run to see that if the application has been protected against this payload. It is important to know that any changes we make to these tests are pointless because the remote repository is tested against the test conditions that will be overwritten every time. So there's no point in changing them because the actual test happening will be using changes that are always overwritten. However, since this is a trivial challenge, it's easy difficulty, these tests are given to us as examples so we can understand what exactly is happening over here. In order to pass this challenge, all we have to do is make sure that both of these tests pass. The usability is intact and the security is also intact. Security test effectively teaches the condition that result in the security vulnerability. So our focus will be to prevent that root cause. Now, if you know our app, it's essentially a web app, as we discussed. And what it does is it returns a string called hello. However, in our test, we already have that it's expecting SecDim as well. We can see how we want to run a test by submitting any changes. Any changes can be submitted by essentially clicking on the edit button, and we can have like a comment over here. This is a comment. Upon doing so, we can scroll down. We can do commit and test, which allows us to make a commit and immediately test it. So as you can see, the tests start running. It goes through various stages, which is the cloning and then the initialization. And then once that is done, the test is conducted. It first runs the usability test, which I described is essentially a measure of how the application functions. These should, in theory, always pass because we want our application to be functional. Once the usability tests have passed, then after that, we proceed to the next one. The logs that we're getting from the server show that we have managed to progress into the usability test. The tests have been working fine. Now we go to the security test. The security test was conducted. However, it failed as expected. That is because the site returns hello, whereas the security test is simply expecting SecDim. It is important to note that this is just for demonstration's sake. This is not an actual security bug. It's just to show that in SecDim challenges, you have usability tests that'll pass, and you have security bugs that you need to fix, which are judged by the security test. Now, we are allowed to use any library or dependency that already exists. We can have a look at this, and when we look at the root folder, we have our Docker file. The Docker essentially outlines the requirements to create the container that we can run it locally on our device. Along with that, you have the README, which has your instructions. Along with that, we have the makefile, which is a helper shell script. This facilitates the building, the running, the testing of the Docker on our local system. So anyhow, without further ado, let's try and fix this. So if we look at the test again, the usability one had no problems. The app is working as expected. It returns a 200, that's okay. And it returns hello, so that's good for us. The security specification, however, stated that it should expect the string SecDim in the response. So in order to fix that, we can head to our application right now, and we can add this simply. Right now over here, we are adding hello. So if we simply append SecDim to this, that should be good enough. So now we can commit. If you click on commit only, it'll no longer fire the test automatically. This is useful if you want to make commits, but you don't want to immediately test them. But well, you can always test them as you need to. Now that we are running our test, this time, since we have addressed the security concern, we are going to send back SecDim as a response in addition to hello as well. It should theoretically pass. And would you look at that? The security test passed because we added the SecDim response to that. And with that, you can see that we have passed our very first challenge. And we can move on to the next one.